Good morning, year ones. Welcome to your first maths lesson for this week. Today, we're going to start some learning on a new chapter all about fractions. Before you start this session, it might be really helpful to know you might need some of these resources to help you with today's learning. You might need some square pieces of paper right at the beginning of the session, then maybe some paper shapes that have been cut out for you, like circles, rectangles and triangles. You'll need these in the middle of the lesson for our activity time, and you might want some scissors as well for today's learning. Once you have all of those things, let's move on. So today, like I said, we are moving on to a new chapter about fractions. We have already done lots of learning about multiplication and division, and this can become really useful when we're learning about fractions, and you'll later see why. Really, fractions or a fraction is when a whole thing, in today's case a shape, has been shared equally into a number of parts. Now today we're going to focus on splitting an object, the shape, into two equal parts, and you're going to be able to identify shapes that have been split into two equal parts already. If you look at some of these shapes here, I'm sure you could talk to an adult at home and tell them which ones are equally split into two parts and which ones are not equally shared into two parts. It's that simple. But we're going to move on and have a look at our in focus next. So Holly and Charles both have a square piece of art paper. They would like to share this piece of art paper equally between the two of them. So at home, what we'd like you to do using square pieces of paper is to show all of the ways Charles and Holly could have shared their piece of art paper. I would suggest that you fold your paper to show two equal parts. Then have a think about how you can be sure that they definitely are equal. And what is it that you might call each piece that you give to Charles and Holly when that whole square has been shared into two equal parts? I wonder if you know what we call that when we share something equally between two. So now's your time to pause the video and see how many different ways you can fold that paper to give each child the same amount. Pause the video and have a go. Now here is just one way we could have shared the paper equally, by folding the paper straight down the middle. We can see that Charles and Holly both have the same amount of paper. The size of their paper is exactly the same. To check it was exactly the same, you could have made sure that when you folded your paper, all of the sides and the edges and the corners were all lined up neatly, that there were no bits overlapping. You could have also cut along where you had folded and checked that the pieces of paper lay on top exactly the same size. But we're going to think about now, what might we call each part when the whole shape has been shared into two equal parts? The whole is the square piece of paper. We've cut it into two parts. I wonder what each part is called. Well, let's find out. So, we can see that Charles gets this much. It says here, this is half. Well done if you thought when we share something in two, we are showing half. Well, Holly then gets this piece, the other piece. This is also a half. So we can see that two halves make the whole piece of art paper. There's one half for Charles, one half for Holly. All together they have the whole piece of paper. Here are some other ways we could have shared that paper equally. We could have had the line vertically, so they both get a portrait piece of art paper. We could have shared it horizontally, cutting across this way, so they both have a landscape piece of paper. But in both circumstances, There is one whole piece of art paper shared equally into two parts. They both still have half. This is Holly's half, this is Charles's half. Altogether, their two halves make the whole piece of art paper. Over here, you can see we could have shared it by cutting diagonally down the paper in either direction. Although this is a different shape to the art paper they would get here, the square has still only been shared equally into two parts, so it still shows half, just in a different way. As long as both those halves are the same size, they are equal. In all of these cases, there was a whole piece of paper. We shared it between two, so we had two parts. There were two children who wanted those parts, and I know if I have two things and I share them between two people, they each get one each. That's why they both had one piece of paper. Now I wonder what would happen if I had cut my art paper into 4 equal pieces. There's still only two children. How are they going to share that equally and make sure they both get half? There's 4 pieces. We've said earlier half is where you share it into 2 equal pieces or 2 equal parts. Now this paper has been cut into 4 parts, but we still only want to share it between 2. That's the 2 children. How many pieces of paper will each child get? You might want to pause the video and talk about this at home. Now I'm going to give 1 piece of paper to Charles and another piece to Holly. Have I used up all of that art paper yet? No, so I need to keep sharing it a little bit more. Another piece for Charles, another piece for Holly. Have we shared all of the paper? We have, and how many pieces do each of them have? That's right, they both have 2 pieces. And if we look here, Charles's 2 pieces are the same as when he had his one larger piece here. They've just been cut into smaller parts. So this time they both need 2 pieces of paper. Now it's time for you to have a go at your activity. You need to have different shapes cut out at home, like I suggested at the beginning, and you need to try and fold and cut your shapes into halves. I wonder if then you could journal about them, just like the children have done in the book here. They've cut their square into half and labelled each part as half. There's one half, there's another half. And then they've written 2 halves make 1 whole. I wonder what shapes you can do this with at home. Pause the video and spend as long or as little on this as you like. Okay, our guided practice time. We've got to look at these shapes and think really carefully. Which of these shapes show halves? Remember, we need that shape to be shared equally into 2 parts. Pause the video and talk about this at home with an adult. See what you can find out. Now, if I look at these green shapes, I can see there are 2 parts in both of them. The difference is this one has been shared equally because I can see both parts are the same size. This one, no it hasn't. There's 2 parts, but this one is much bigger. Imagine if this was a cake and somebody at home got this really big piece of cake and you only got that tiny piece. You would not be very happy. That would not be very fair. So this one does show a half, the other one doesn't. So we've got a half there. What about the purple shapes? Well, again, I can see this one has been shared equally into 2 parts. They both look the same size. One of them has been coloured in. I am happy that's half. This one's been shared into 4 equal parts. Now, earlier we also shared our square into 4 equal parts, but each child got 2 of those pieces, and in this picture there's only 1 coloured in, so that cannot be half. We're going to learn what that is really called tomorrow. I can see a half here, even though it's been shared in a very unusual way. I think if I were to cut out the white part and lay it on top of the blue one, they would be the same size. Is this a half? No, it can't be. There's 3 parts and they're not equal. Is this a half? Yes, I agree. What about this one? This is a tricky one. That line has not been drawn straight down the middle. It's at a slight angle, but I can see there's a small or a very short side there and a very short side here. And then they both have a slightly longer side. And I know that these sides are the same length. And I think after I've drawn over that, if I were to cut them out again and lay them on top, I am convincing myself they will be equal. So I think that's a half too. And we can see that one's half. It's been shared straight down the middle. Now this one has been shared into 8 pieces, but I only want to show half. So how many people would be sharing those 8 pieces? Yes, we just need to share the 8 things between 2. Now, what is 8 shared with 2? Or when we are finding dividing by 2, we can just say what is half of that number. So do you know what half of 8 is? Half of 8 is 4. So I would just colour in 4 of those squares. So I might colour this square in, this one. It doesn't have to be in a row, but I'm going to. You could colour any 4 squares. And this one here. And I can see that that is the same as finding half. It's a bit like how I found halves here. Your worksheets for today can be found on the Home Learning website. Your first activity, you've got to show you can recognise and identify halves. Remember, your shape needs to be shared into 2 parts, but it's so important those 2 parts are equal. If they are, give it a tick. So if you think this shows a half, give it a tick. If you think this shows half, give it a tick. If not, leave the box empty or even pop a cross in. Then you have to show me half of this square. Now notice there are more than 2 pieces that it's been shared into. So you need to think about what half of a square looks like and colour the right number of squares. Imagine it's a large piece of cake that's been cut up into lots of parts. How are you going to share it with yourself and somebody at home? How many smaller pieces of cake would you each get? Then can you show me half of your rectangle, your triangle and your circle? Count up the number of parts it's being shared into and then find half of that amount. So you colour the right amount. Once you've done those activities, on the Home Learning page you can actually find some of today's extension challenges and you can continue these throughout the week. Now the ones that are appropriate for you to do today, I will quickly flash up on the screen for you to investigate more at home with somebody at home. So you can have a look at this extension challenge, which is focusing on half, finding half of a rectangle, and they want to see how many different ways you can find of sharing a rectangle in half. Then you have an activity to sort shapes into whether they are or are not shared equally into halves. And then show how many different ways you can shade and colour half of that shape. Even though it's the same shape 8 times, that means there must be 8 ways that you could share or colour that shape to show half. All of those activities you can look at in more detail on the Home Learning page. It's been saved as a document for you to open up. When you've done some of your learning, feel free to send it in to us at the Key Stage 1 email address. I look forward to doing some more fractions with you tomorrow, and take care and have a nice day. Bye!